In our last conversation, you spoke about the importance of setting up a routine in the kind of life that most people are living today under these restrictions, and also the importance of learning to meditate, even if you've never meditated before, as a way of taking the opportunity to go inwards and find that empowerment that you were talking about. I wanted to ask you what advice you would give to people about doing this, starting to meditate, in a time where they're feeling a lot of stress, maybe feeling claustrophobic, maybe they're experiencing tension or friction with the people they're living with, inevitably, or maybe they're lonely, maybe they're elderly, or they're just on their own in a bedsit in quarantine. How would you see and how would you encourage people to meditate given those kind of situations?
Well, I mean, I personally think and also feel that meditation, at least for me, is easier in the morning. When we are a bit fresher and so on. And so for me, it works better in the morning. And I also hear that from other people, but this is not something that can be generalized, because I think people need to find when it is best for them. But one thing that I think is important is expectations. I think this question of expectations is an important one, because if we set our expectations too high and we don't achieve them, then we feel disappointed, and then that works against us. So, if we can't, as far as meditation is concerned, have low expectations. So just meditate for a few minutes, say 5 minutes, to try. And if it is a mantra meditation, to use the mantra for 5 minutes. And even if the mind travels, because it will, because that's the nature of mind, just gently bring it back without reproach and without giving yourself a hard time. Because that is really what we as humans tend to do. We are so well schooled on guilt that we try and do that. So, but if we just take it as normal, the more we do it, the more we will be in control of our mind. And it's a wonderful thing to be in control of our mind, because even for practical reasons, whether it is relaxation or whether it is training the attention and being more able to remember where we left the keys, little things like that. I think meditation has got so many positive results in day-to-day life and living. So, I would suggest that expectations is an important one. Keep the expectations within our limitations, within our possibilities.
And perhaps if people were starting to meditate for the first time under stressful conditions, and they found that they were very fidgety and very agitated when they sat down and began to be still and silent, begin with 5 or 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then, as you say, don't evaluate or judge the meditation, just do it, give it time. It takes time, doesn't it, to see the fruits and the benefits appearing. And then gradually you'll probably want to increase the length of time because you'll begin to feel the benefits.
Yes, absolutely. Very much so.
Mm. Yeah. And if you found that, if somebody found that they were meditating, but there was just turmoil, just a lot of, to begin with anyway, a lot of agitation, anger maybe, or sadness, or depression. I mean, how would you recommend that they handle that?
Well, in my work, I work with the body, and in terms of paying attention to the body. And one of the a good strategy to deal with that is to just feel the feeling in the body, whether it is anger, fear, whatever it is. Feelings reside in the body. Thoughts reside in the mind. Feelings in the body. And this is also something that people sometimes need to learn. I have come across people who confuse thinking and feeling. And learning that feelings reside in the body and starting to be curious about it is a good thing. And when the person feels those feelings of rage, which meditation will bring up, will bring up for those people that have these locked in feelings of rage and anger and fear and so on. I would suggest that the best thing to do is just very quietly, with a relaxed body, just focus the attention on the body, noticing it, doing nothing about it, just noticing it almost in a non-attached way, and continuing with the mantra or whatever it is that they use for meditative practice. But just noticing, because it is very, very interesting that we have those feelings. Once we take notice of them, they change. And very often they reduce because they are there, because they need to call our attention to them. And when we do attend to them, there is something that happens. They change. They very often they become diffused, and then they dissipate.
We say, as you know, when we teach the mantra, that the mantra is the way of dealing with distractions, not trying to fight the distractions or suppress them, but to let go of them, as you were saying in the previous conversation, just to let go. And what you're saying, I think, here is that even if a strong emotion comes up, like sadness or anger or restlessness, that you can, by accepting it, noticing it, you don't have to solve it.
Yes, absolutely, exactly. That's exactly right.
Let go of it.
Yeah, don't have to solve it.
And the mantra can help to do that in a very gentle way. So it's not about climbing a high mountain so much.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Yeah.
One other thing, just before we finish this conversation. Many people, as you were saying, might deal with the stress and the claustrophobia of this time of shutdown by developing addictions. That we're all addicted, of course, we're in an addictive society. Maybe they're finding that they are getting addicted to, as you say, maybe Netflix, or maybe to alcohol, or to some other kind of habit that gives some consolation or some relief or some break in distraction, but actually is an unhealthy one, because it doesn't really make us feel better. How would you advise people if they notice that this is happening? They probably would notice it, doing something like that too much. How would you advise them to deal with that, the beginning of the nature of addiction?
Yeah. Yes, that is a tricky one. I mean, addiction is a form of, it's an anesthetic, whatever addiction it is, that, we are trying to anesthetize something. And in times like this, I imagine that the pull of something like an addiction, in order to anesthetize all the uncertainty and the anxiety that's around, it can be understandable. But of course, it really depends on the impact that it has on the person. An addiction is a lack of control. So if the person, there are some very well developed steps that some organizations have developed, like for instance the AA. They have very focused way of dealing with it. It's not for everybody, but this recognition that the addiction is bigger than them, and then to try and regain the control with partners and other people helping them out of the addiction. So it really depends on how destructive the addiction is being. But it is certainly something that needs to be attended to before it takes over. And as we were talking before in the last time about control, to try and be able to control that which we can control. And so it's not to let it get out of hand. And once it is out of hand, then then perhaps resorting to those organizations who have got all the training and the resources to help with that.
And before maybe going to one of those organizations, if it did become bad, that habit got bad, just talking about it with a friend or someone you trust, someone confidential, would be a way of getting some measure of control.
Because it requires strategy to let go of these habits. And of course, the first, habit can become an addiction. And that requires a proper strategy to address it. It needs to have very focused attention to let go of a habit that is likely or is in danger of becoming an addiction.
Let's come back to that on another occasion. As you know, through the Contemplative Path website, and we are setting up as many opportunities for people to meditate with others online. And I must say, I've become aware of how strong the connection. We were talking about meditation as a way of connection, and that feeling of connection is very powerful when you're meditating, even online with others. And in a time like this, when the danger is we feel disconnected, we feel stressed, we feel frightened, out of control, this feeling of friendliness and human companionship at this level of a spiritual journey together seems to me to be a very good strategy. Would you see the value of that?
Absolutely, very much so. I think there is nothing that can replace something like that. The connection with others and feeling a sense of belonging. Absolutely, yeah, very powerful.
Well, thank you, Claudia. I think you've given us a lot of reassurance that there is a way of understanding this process we're going through. And even though we feel we're losing control, perhaps, we can also see it as an opportunity to make deeper connections with ourselves and with others. Thank you for your encouragement, born of a lot of experience and a lot of compassion in helping other people over many years. I'm sure many of the people who've been listening to this will find it very reassuring and helpful. And we'll come back and have another conversation before too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.